Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Research Works podcast. We have an excellent episode for you today. I am traveling solo today as I interview our guest. Ash is currently away. She's still hoping that her broken arm will be healed very, very soon after being hit by some two teenagers on their scooters. Again, public service announcement, please watch out on those scooters because it affects people like Ash. But today, whilst I'm going solo, there are many guests on the other side of the line because we're talking about a hot topic, something that was published quite recently. I was involved in this publication as well, and there's been so much conversation around it. Yes, you guessed it. The title of this article is "Where is the Evidence? Challenging Therapists to Stop Legitimizing Dynamic Movement Intervention and Cuevas Medek Exercises," published in peer-reviewed Journal of Pediatric or Physical Therapy in September 2025. So we have our guests, our authors of this paper, Ginny Paleg, Álvaro Hidalgo-Robles, Roslyn Livingstone, and Dr. David Frumberg. Welcome to the pod, my friends. Hi.
Good morning. Good night.
Hi.
I know there's many time zones here. We're traveling from Australia to Europe to the US and Canada, so it's quite a range here. And it's a beautiful combination of, therapists, clinicians, doctors, researchers to talk about this. So normally I do an intro for each of you, but I thought now that I've got all four of you guys here with me today, I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about what it is that you do during the day, because how we connected is through our clinical work. And I think that's a really cool story. So let's start with Dr. David Frumberg, first time on the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you do.
How we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. My practice is divided in half. So half of it, I do complex limb reconstruction for kids and adults. But the other half, the more pertinent part, is I take care of people with neurodevelopmental disorders from birth to geriatric. And so, the kind of the full lifespan.
That's amazing. Even just saying reconstruction, just to think about what it is that you do sounds incredible. Whereabouts do you work, David?
A lot of tools used, a lot of power tools.
A lot of power tools, yeah.
I'm at Yale, which is in New Haven, Connecticut in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty nice because I grew up in New York and it's close to New York, but not New York. It's not. People from New York aren't just showing up. Maybe they drive through on their way to Boston. But
sounds like a lovely place. Sounds lovely. And you're also on the scientific committee for the AACPDM for New Orleans, which is happening just this coming week, isn't it?
Next week. It's not too late. After this episode drops, get on a plane. Come talk to me. Come talk to Ginny.
That's right.
We'll be there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an incredible conference. And we've spoken to so many people already of these breaking papers that are hot off the press. So much to talk about there. So thank you for joining us today in your very busy schedule, David. It wasn't easy to make sure we could find some time here with all the work that you do. So grateful for you to be here. Moving along now, we've got Roslyn Livingstone. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Now, you've got the earliest hour, so let's just let everyone know it's 5 a.m. for you. So you look fresh, You look pretty amazing. Do you mind telling everyone a little bit about what it is that you're doing at the moment?
Well, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm based in British Columbia. I worked for over 30 years at Sunnyhill Health Centre in Vancouver, doing seating, mobility, and assistive technology assessment with kids with complex disabilities. And I've been focusing the last 3 years or so on more education and research, working with some projects with Ginny and Álvaro and other colleagues overseas on projects related to hypotonia, the evidence for seating, standing, and now I'm focusing on research. Back to my main love, which is early powered mobility with kids with cerebral palsy primarily.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
What you didn't say is embarking on your PhD, might I add.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible, but
Sadly,
a lot of
must be
clinical
crazy.
background. Yeah, no, absolutely. If you're going to do a PhD, absolutely, I would agree. As someone who's no stranger to that is Álvaro, who's currently finishing up his PhD. Welcome back to the pod, my friend, all the way in Spain. Tell everyone a little bit about what it is that you're doing at the moment.
Well, still with a PhD. So I am a PhD candidate at the International University of La Rioja here in Spain. And I am a pediatric physical therapy and researcher in preterms and infants with brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
Above all, focusing on early detection and intervention for CP. For scientific credibility and for its sake, after our last podcast, I made sure we have a reference from episode 4 there.
He's nodding his head in approval. That's
nothing
fabulous.
Today.
Yep.
Prequels. More prequels.
Thank you for restoring credibility there. Well done, Álvaro. Lovely to have you back on the pod. And of course, we have the wonderful Ginny Paleg. Welcome back to the pod, Ginny.
Thanks. It's so fun to be here with all these great people.
I know, this is pretty fun. We've introduced you before, but I thought just from your own lips, what it is that you do and what fills your days these days?
I'm the working girl, so I'm still working 3 days a week in early intervention. I work for my local school district. I live about 8 miles from the White House, so it's a busy part of the country, although I grew up in New York, not far from David, so we have a lot in common there. But I still change diapers, I get thrown up on, so I'm in it every day. I do lots of coaching and childcares. I go to parents' houses. I tend to get more of the kids that are at GMFCS level 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. I tend to get the families at the very beginning of their journey when we're doing the Hind, because with the help of Roz and Álvaro, we've trained everybody in my county, all the motor therapists in Hind, in doing early detection, really just so we can get diagnostic-specific ingredients into the mix.
Yeah, I love that.
I got my PhD when I was 45. It took me 9 years. I got NDT certified back in the 80s. So I think, I don't have fingernails. I don't have nail polish. I don't have any heels. All my shoes are flat. So I think you'd call me a clinician.
All the telltale
I've never
signs.
gotten thrown up on, but I've definitely gotten punched in the face. You get punched in the face a couple times?
Oh, wow.
I've been bitten.
You've been bitten? Mm.
Bitten is bad.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Slogging it out.
I guess the point of that was to really talk about what it is that we do clinically. Most people know from my perspective, the reason why we started the podcast back in 2021 was just to bring evidence, the latest evidence to our peers and our colleagues who might not always have the time to read an article. And as a practicing physiotherapist or a physical therapist for the people in the northern part of the world, my job is a lot of working alongside families, measuring outcomes, listening to their voices about what they want. And really what comes to light with that is the F words, because we want to put life in balance and we want to, as much as possible, support children in achieving their goals, having families who are feeling whole and have the time to enjoy life as well. And with that perspective, that's why I am so adamant about wanting to be evidence-based, and hence the reason for the podcast and kind of the reason why we wrote this article. So let's get into this. I've got some questions for all of you. And I thought this article has definitely generated a lot of discussion, particularly online. And we've seen some of them and we love some of the discussion points that people have been having. But there's also been some things I thought would be really worthwhile addressing, because there's a lot of comments that are being said in certain chat groups that I think, let's have a chat about what we're meaning by it and where we've come from it, and why we embarked on this in the first place. So let's go through that. Let's start off by why we wrote this paper. So I'm going to go back to the origins of this, and we all have our origin story with this. Let's start with you, Ginny and Roz. You really helped to gather us together to write this paper. What was the motivation in the first place for you?
I think over time, how Roz and I became unfunded researchers doing work off the side of our table, was because we were doing things that we believed in, and we wanted to see if that was the right ingredients. Were we doing the right thing?
I love that.
So way back when I had my intensive, I ran an intensive in the mid-90s, and I published that data. Diane Damiano, also an author on this paper, who couldn't be with us this morning, helped me organize that so that I presented my data. So when I was doing that intensive, I had a family from Texas come up, and they were going to see Esther Fink. They would go twice a year for a week up to Toronto. So I explored that with them. They showed me all their videos of what they were doing for CME. The child was crying. It was 3 to 6 hours a day that the mom had to put in doing these exercises. So I contacted Esther Fink. I contacted Ramon. We started conversations back in the 90s.
Wow.
Then in the 2000s, I was teaching for educational resources with Esther Fink, not the same course, but sort of in parallel. So I got to go to a lot of her classes and get to know her, and then also continued conversations with Ramon. So when Jakob came up in Brooklyn, he was a CME provider in Brooklyn. I also had kids that were in my program that had Jakob as their private therapist. So again, having lots of conversations with him about CME. And then at some point that became and morphed into DMI. And I had so many friends asking me, what do you think about this? I can make a lot of money. It's an interesting thing. What do you think? So this came about with conversations we were having over the internet. I'll let Roz talk about that with Ramon, and then lots of conversations over WhatsApp, texting and talking with Jakob and with Joanne.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of conversations over the last few decades, hasn't there? Let's follow on with that now with you, Roz, because I know that there's been some discussions early on, some email correspondence with Ramon himself.
That's right. When this whole started, as things usually happen with Ginny, is suddenly she copies me on an email from some unknown person that I have no idea what it's about.
Familiar.
And there's a whole email string below it that I have to read and try and
decipher. Yes. Okay.
And so, I email back, like, what is all this about? I mean, I have to confess, I wasn't particularly familiar with CME or DMI when this whole topic started. Ginny, was sharing with me that Ramon was the developer of CME starting in the 70s, and they were from the email string, they were clearly familiar with each other over a long period of time, that they had corresponded multiple times.
Yes.
He clearly understood Ginny's perspective, that she didn't believe that you could facilitate reflexes and shape that into active movement. And he was kind of, he was asking questions. There was a respectful interaction between them. And the conversation was really that Ginny was looking at the evidence behind these. He was bringing up some of his concerns about DMI and feeling that the origins in CME were not being fully discussed or disclosed, and wanting to share the evidence that he had, that he felt was strong, and that we really needed to understand the evidence base. So in those conversations, he shared the articles that he had, and that's basically what we described in the paper.
Yeah,
and that was really my role in this whole project. Was Ginny said, look at these articles, tell me what you think. Is this evidence-based? And, let's try and document this.
Yeah.
And then she wanted to pull together other voices to sort of round out the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And it's, it's very objective to have that proper review process. And those discussions were very recent as well. They're at the beginning of this whole journey, which just was earlier this year, really, wasn't it? So that's been described quite fully in the paper. Over to you now, David. What inspired you to be part of this authorship group to talk about this topic? This is very much, when you talk about DMI and CME, it's often very allied health driven. So to have someone like you in your role, I'm very curious about why you decided to step into this.
Yeah, I think a lot of orthopedists probably don't really even know what these things are. But the problem is that parents are talking about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, here we have a multidisciplinary program, which is probably the standard of care everywhere. The CP program. You have new people coming in, and we see, all ages. So like I'm seeing 70-year-olds that
Wow.
obviously like they had a much different experience when they were younger. But the parents who really want to do a lot and are on social media quite a bit always kind of come into the office asking about these things. So as a clinician who's trying to know everything to be a better understood, or I would say better educated, I kind of learned about it myself. And at first, at face value, I thought this therapy looks like maybe it makes a lot of sense. But then I couldn't find a single piece of research for it. And that was independent of Ginny like nagging me about this. That was way before. And the other thing that happens is that there's a lot of people, so I didn't realize at first, but sometimes to do these therapies, you have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. And a lot of people just don't have the means to do that. And I had one very specific patient, it comes to mind. They're not very wealthy people at all. And they would repeatedly crowd fund, raise money through their church, through all these things to send their kid to get these therapies. And I was like, come on, man, kid doesn't have a good stroller. Wouldn't you maybe spend the money a little bit better? So I just felt like from an equity standpoint, it wasn't great. And so then I looked into it further, and here we are. So I think we have a duty as doctors to not just kind of hide behind our familiar toolbox. Like I shouldn't go in there and say I just do bones and cut things. These are patients who are coming for expertise.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn about what this was. And then once I found that there was no evidence, it was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
Enter Ginny.
Yeah. And then there we have the context. I love that because you're absolutely right. In those clinic rooms, families do see you as the expert. They wait, to see you. They've got all these questions for you and they do want your opinion. And your opinion matters a lot in that. So I think directing people to, clear sources of information is part of our duty. And I love that curiosity drove that for you, David. What about?
It also happens to be a really tricky time, in the world. There's a lot of question about science.
Yeah.
And so, I'll have interactions in the office where, I'm not saying don't do certain things. I'm just saying I'm at an academic institution. I give evidence-based recommendations, and I can't recommend this. There's no evidence for something. It's no different than surgical techniques.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of uncertainty based on, just the way people feel.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Álvaro, I've seen you on social media a fair bit, talking a lot about this particular paper and speaking beautifully in a way that I cannot understand. And I press the AI and it translates you into English and I go, wow, that's your voice. What's been the response here from the Latin America world? You seem to have had a lot of people interested, from the networks that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think the impact of these therapies, DMI and Cuevas Medek, because of their origins in Latin America, recently in Spain, is quite significant. I think that in Spain, particularly, the pattern seems to mirror what we have seen in other high-income countries. But sharing, I see this in social media, sharing a common language across Spain and Latin America turns Spanish into a powerful amplifier. And in social media, you can see huge amount of content circulating in Spanish. And then just like other countries, we see Cuevas Medek or DMI outside the public health system, reported as innovative therapy and spreading fast from therapists and private clinics and eventually to family groups.
Wow.
But as David said, the situation is even more concerning in low and middle income resource settings, where the investing in non-evidence-based intervention doesn't just waste resources, it actually deepens the inequities. It pulls the limited time, money, and energy away from school, from family moments, from time at the park, and from intervention, we know really make a difference.
Yeah.
And yet it's precisely in these regions in Latin America where so many clinicians and researchers are really fighting the hardest, trying to build evidence-based practices. And they deserve far more visibility and support than the loud marketing narratives.
Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. And I think we're all saying the same kind of thing here. And I love that, one of the main themes, if I'm doing a thematic analysis on the social media posts and how people have responded to this, the criticism of not consulting CME and DMI founders doesn't really hold weight here in terms of the exploration has happened over a number of years, in fact, decades. And from everything we've been talking about here, there's been years of consultation, and it's not just been with the founders, it's actually been with families who've engaged in these kind of interventions as well. I'm going to throw over to you now, David. When it comes to interacting with families who are engaging in these therapies, are they describing it to you in terms of what it looks like? Are they drawn to it through social media? What's your impression about how families are finding this particular intervention and how they discovered it, I guess?
I would say social media is the nail on the head. I mean, this is it's 2025. That's where people get their information.
Which is scary.
The problem is when you, I know. So I call it TikTok therapy, because that's where they learn about it.
Yeah.
And again, do the research and tell us that it's great and it works, and we'll all be very happy that these people were doing it. But until that happens, I feel like if you have limited time, limited resources, like Álvaro was saying, why would you not spend that time and resources on something we know works and not do this other thing like the new best and greatest?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think when it comes to that and what people see in social media, I think we should spend some time on that a little bit, because that is the part where people like bring it up and go, well, I see that it works with my own eyes. I don't need to do the research to show you that this works. I can see it with my own eyes, and there's no need for any measurable outcomes. And one of the quotes is often that we've seen from one of the founders is a lack of evidence is not evidence of lack of efficacy, which basically applies to everything. So what they're trying to say is what we see with our own eyes is enough. Álvaro, I know you've got some things to say about that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because visually people are judging this intervention based on that and really disregarding any other evidence.
They're using the anecdotal experience as a form of real world evidence. I read like that. And I think an important point is that we are not dismissing therapists or families' experiences. They are valuable, they are necessary, but clinical observation, as you said, or popularity or likes on Instagram, they are not evidence. They don't prove an intervention's effectiveness. Children, as we will be talking about, improve for many reasons. And the problem is that they are doing it. They are doing this kind of therapies without accepting the basic rules of the scientific knowledge. And I mean, we are not a secret society to bring down. I would be happy to do them if actually made any sense.
And I think that's such a good, important point, isn't it? Because often these interventions are applied to very young children. And we know that maturation is a very real thing. DMI is often sprouted for something for all conditions and something that all children can have. So a child with CP is going to progress differently to a child with global developmental delay or someone without a diagnosis. Without tone, without spasticity and dystonia versus a child that does have that, you're going to respond at a different rate. But children also do develop as well. So let's talk a little bit about maturation and why that needs to be an important consideration, and that's where outcome measures comes in. Ros, do you want to take this one when it comes to maturation and outcome measures and why we need to be using them as actual tools?
Well, I think that's when we looked at the studies that were shown to us as being evidence of the effectiveness of CME, because that's where the bulk of the evidence that we could actually find that's been published. The measures tend to be part of the therapy almost. They were specific to the intervention. They're not tools that have been developed rigorously that you can see are valid and effective and the repeatable measurements. So tracking change over time, that's a huge risk to the to the research that's being done. And children, as you say, are changing and developing all the time. So most of the case reports that have been published, we don't know how those children were going to progress.
That's right.
I think the early one was a child who had hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. The outcomes are vastly different. The therapy started very early, and we just don't know what would have happened or what other things were happening in their life. As David said, the children change and develop for many reasons. We just don't know what was happening at home and what would happen otherwise.
Yeah. And I think the point in that as well that's just so vital is when you see things on social media. So in Australia, we're not allowed to put up testimonials, for example. That's a violation of our code of conduct as health professionals, because a testimonial doesn't provide any context, and we can't show a before and after because you don't know what they've actually done. You don't know if the videos were taken at a good moment versus a bad moment at the beginning, and what that might actually look like. So when these testimonials are vastly put online and they're very much, watch how we did before the intensive, now after, it's an unfair playing ground, really. And when you're thinking about evidence and using evidence, the only way to be able to tell someone has truly had an intervention effect at this age is a controlled trial, because you need to be able to see whether the intervention itself is more than maturation. And if it isn't more than natural maturation, there's no point. And that was the whole idea of NDT. They did massive trials, and when you do a meta-analysis on it, it doesn't matter how much you do, it's no more than standard therapy. So why would you do it? So you actually have to do the work to show it. For the critics who say you don't have to do the work to show it, and visually that's all I need, does anyone want to take this? How should we be talking about this and addressing it with them? David, hand up. Thank you.
I'm not a therapist, so it's great because as an outside perspective, I'm just a scientist, right?
Yeah.
I'm an academic, I'm a citizen of the world. What do you mean you don't have to do the work? What does that even mean? Efficacy and all this, throwing out these big words. Come on now. No, you have to do the work because these are dollars being spent. These are minutes being spent. You must do the work. This is no different than, and I'm just going to talk from my world.
Yeah.
A new surgical technique comes out.
Yep.
Someone puts it on social media. Look at what I could do. Let's say like something I don't do. Let's say it's like plastic surgery, right? Look at this new way to do a facelift. It's so incredible. And they show a couple of photos of some people getting facelifts and they look great. And they don't show you what those people look like 5 years from then.
Yeah.
You just got to take their word for it.
Yeah.
How's that any different?
Yeah.
So as an outsider, someone who just steers parents or tries to give them ideas, like, what do you mean you don't have to do it? That's craziness. Okay. Maybe that wasn't as helpful, but that's how I look at it.
No, I think it is really helpful. Can I go back on that one then, David? Is one of the many comments that we've seen as people have looked at the post, they've said, well, why won't the research community help me to do research in this area?
Oh, yeah. So the onus is someone can. I mean, if there's someone listening to this who wants to research it, that would be awesome. Like we're not saying don't do it. We're just saying stop putting it on a pedestal.
Yep.
Don't put this at meetings.
Yeah.
Don't glorify something that has not been proven yet.
Yeah.
Maybe it gets proven positive. Maybe it gets a red light. Maybe it gets a green light. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right now it's just a yellow light, maybe a red light.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And do the work. Álvaro, you had some things to say about that as well when that comment's come up a lot is asking, people to do the work to prove DMI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have a sentence in Spanish to talk about this. It's like le dan la vuelta a la tortilla, no? It completely flips the logic, the scientific logic. The burden of proof doesn't fall on those who question a method. It falls on those who promote and sell and earn money with this. And anyone commercializing a therapy or a product or something has the duty to prove it works before offering it to families. So I think it's not very difficult to understand. And as David said, it's something that applies to almost everything.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And, the issue here is that DMI as a course has been sold to many clinicians, right? It's you pay for this to learn how to do this intervention. And even on their website, as we quoted in our paper as well, calls it this new research methodology based on evidence. It isn't. So in terms of selling a course, there needs to be some transparency there about the work that's been done for it. Is there, I guess from your perspective, Ginny, when it comes to doing that, you do the GMFM a lot. We talk about the GMFM a lot. We talk about mapping it to percentiles and really tracking progress over time. What is the main point about doing outcome measures? Because what I'm hearing a lot is I can see a difference, but I'm not going to measure it, or I can't measure it. Like there's not enough outcome measures to be able to measure what I'm seeing, which I find troubling as a clinician. I think you can do goals. There's objective measures based on task specificity. There's a lot of outcome measures about that. What's your comment to that?
There's the right tool for everything. David proved us that this morning when he came up with all his cool podcast tools. So there's the right tool. And Peter Rosenbaum loves to say, what's the question? So I think what I'm seeing in some of the studies that I'm looking at is the tool they picked wasn't the right one to answer the question. And that really goes back to why we did this in the first place. And it was this, David's come up with this beautiful time toxicity. Families were choosing, instead of going to Disney World, instead of going on vacation with their families, to do these intensives. And that just didn't seem consistent with what we know now works best. So we know that leisure activities, we know that participation, that being with your family is the valuable thing. The promise of fixing, the promise of curing is written up in this beautiful article. Roz, what's the title of the article that the adults wrote?
It's the tragedy of promising happiness through overcoming disability.
So stop trying to fix me. Stop telling me there's something wrong with me. Stop subjecting me to these hours of meaningless activities. Get me out in the real world. Get me a bike. Get me swimming. I want to have fun.
Yeah.
And so when I see kids for hours and hours stepping on and off wooden boxes, being dropped to the floor on these videos, it breaks my heart, and that's not what I want for my family. It's not what I want for your family.
Yeah.
But what do you want for your family? Take the time to sit down. I'm seeing lots of analysis of normal movement and trying to normalize, but I'm not seeing enough conversations of what do you want your daily routine life to look like? Where do you want to sit and eat? Where do you want to go and play? What do you want to do all day? And that's the joy that I want to put back into therapy. And that's why when you look at the article from Iona and Diana on NDT, they dedicated it and did it on behalf of the F-word therapists, which are the people in front of you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What happens when, the other part of the conversation that's starting to come in some of the comments as well is adding DMI to your toolbox. So as a clinician, I just have it in my toolbox and I can do task-specific practice, I can do goal-oriented, I'll do DMI, like it's something that I'll do. And the quote is DMI is a completely different approach. It integrates all of these things with strong scientific evidence. Álvaro, what do you say about that? Because I think that's something that we're both pretty passionate about the toolbox analogy.
We were talking about this yesterday. And I think if you already have a good pizza, if you already have a good toolbox with yellow, with green ingredients, you don't need to add pineapple. You don't need to add the red ones. You shouldn't add pineapple. So it is not a better choice to...
That might be more polarizing than
I love that though. Yeah, why would you need to add that?
I like pineapple on my pizza, just want to say.
I think
everyone
it's
likes it, they
pizza
just don't
styles.
want to admit it. They just feel like it's odd,
I think it's an
There's
interesting...
a man from New Haven. In New Haven, they put clams on their pizza.
Do you really? Right. Okay.
Not me.
Okay, not you. I reject that claim. But I think it's an interesting point with that. One of the things that I've seen quite a lot in my practice, so I've been a physiotherapist now for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of different therapies come through, and I sometimes do see families that they want to do everything, right? They want to do DMI, they want to do whole body vibration, they want to do task-specific practice. And I often say to families, I think it's too much, number one. But number two, it's really confusing for your child because the foundational principles of what these are all based on are important. And I know it sounds boring and theoretical to talk about it, but the motor learning principles that we are upholding, that are green light, that show the greatest effect, is how we learn. It's do it in a meaningful context. Funnily enough, it's task specific, and feel what it's like, make some errors, and then you can do it. It's built on your own initiation. So if we do that sort of approach versus someone who does DMI or very manual facilitation, it's all very much a therapist-induced movement. So the child's constantly waiting for someone to do something to them before they initiate their movement. They're two completely different things. And the only way I can describe that, it's like taking antibiotics with probiotics at the same time. Like, is there any point? And it kind of nullifies it. But I've seen 15-year-olds who've come to my clinic who've done CME or conductive education for most of their life, and they come and see me, they can stand. They can stand really well. And parents say they can walk, but they can only walk when someone shifts their weight completely to one side and to the other. And they're like, they're getting too heavy for me to do that. And it takes so many hours then to kind of go, hey, you can actually do this yourself. And it takes so long for them to learn. So foundationally, the principles are conflicting because they're based on different motor learning models. So doing a bit of everything, I don't think actually helps. I think it confuses the child about what it is they're doing. And you're doing a whole bunch of stuff whilst not doing things that are actually great for kids. So from a time toxicity perspective, which is from you, David, I love that. One of the things we hear and see a lot, and what we wrote in the paper as well, is how crying is interpreted during DMI. So it's signs of effort, and their motivation isn't necessarily required. I feel like this goes against the idea that you're talking about from time toxicity, when we're wanting to spend our time on the right things and joyful things. So crying, not being motivated, versus life where you need to be motivated and be happy, they seem to be conflicting. Your thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, I mean, so time toxicity is a concept that I owe DMCN some edits, and then hopefully you guys will see that within the year.
Beautiful.
We're going to give a nice talk. We gave a talk at EACD about it. We're going to give a nice talk about it again next week at the CP Academy in New Orleans. The concept is really more that there's many levels of this. So on one level, parents want to say that they're doing everything possible for their child, right? They're trying everything they can. And on another level, the gains may be very slow, and people are used to constant dopamine hits in 2025, like social media, Instagram scrolling. So they just want faster results. So some people will turn to other things so that they could get better results for the time, and just to speed things along, which is not necessarily appropriate, as we just were talking about.
Yeah.
So from a time perspective, it makes a lot of sense to just do things that have the greatest bang for the buck. A lot of times that goes all the way back to goal setting, and it goes all the way back to like the basis of the therapeutic relationship, which is inherently a shared decision-making approach. So we're going to talk a lot about that in the manuscript, but in general, if you only have limited time, we'll have so many hours in the day. And as a family, a lot of times families will fail to remember that they need to set aside time to just be a family.
Yeah.
Their family time should not just be therapy time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, there's many levels of this.
I love that. And that therapy time should not be distressing. Like when you're thinking from a child health perspective, we know kids can cry and there's separation and things like that do happen, but the intent of that is to support the child in a very positive way, not to not to push them through to do movements that they necessarily don't have much control over. I think that is a concerning factor. And it's not just observations on social media, but parents do report this as well. They're like, what do I do? Like, they're crying. Should I stop and I help them? Or they go, they need to push through it. This is just part of the therapy process, which I feel just breaks my heart, because I think it's distressing to watch your child who's calling out for you and needs you to comfort them. Your role as a parent versus a therapist has to come in here.
Yeah. And ethically, it's hard too you don't know what the kid wants. You don't know what they're going to want.
Yeah.
And you don't know what their future goals are too.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I heard this Paw Patrol, Paw Patrol,
Yes.
like argue again, just like pineapple on pizza, very polarizing. Kids love Paw Patrol. But I heard this like pretty scathing like interpretation of it. They're like, if you look, like they get in trouble and then a split second later, Ryder comes and gives them the solution. And kids don't really get to learn about how like difficult it is and how you have to get yourself to like do things to help yourself.
Yeah.
And on like I think Malcolm Gladwell did like a whole podcast about it.
Mm-hmm.
But on a very basic level, that's sort of like therapy, right?
Yeah.
So if you are just going to do it for the child, and they're never going to learn how to develop it themselves,
that's right.
then that is a problem.
That is, absolutely. That's beautifully said. Great analogy as well. And that's why the research is quite clear about motor being related to cognition. Like, this is why we would say, help kids to move on their own so they can explore the cognition that's related to that. That's like what you're doing, Ros, powered mobility. It's so vital because those are important developmental connections. Over to you with regards to publications and protocols and why we need to start to make sure our papers or studies are being registered. That's something else that's sort of come up and kind of gone, we've got studies on the way and they should be happening in the area. We've looked onto the registers, and we certainly did for this particular paper as well, didn't we, Ros? Can you just talk to that a little bit?
Yes, we did. We did search the clinical registers looking for any trials that were being reported, and we did find the trial register, interestingly, for one study that we did find on CME that's highly questionable, because when we looked into it, we couldn't actually trace the references that were in there. And as it says in the paper, we looked into that history, but that the whole point of registering trials is that you know in advance what the researchers' intents were. So it's like you were talking about the videos of here's the child before and here's the child after. You just don't take those best moments in that little slice. You have the whole process planned out, and you say what your goals are, your hypotheses, the measures that you're going to use. It's all determined. And then we can compare one intervention to another or to doing nothing and see if there's any difference compared to just child maturation in a group of children where it makes sense. You can't really take interventions and say they're going to work for everybody and then just show slices or sort of cherry pick what fits the narrative.
Important.
You have to look at what's the real world outcome of these interventions.
I love that. Well, I know that David's got to go soon because he is working and has patients to see. I do want to sum this up though, and I think that we've given a lot of perspective with regards to what we've done. I know the criticism is that, we're TMI is only a few years old, we haven't done the research yet. It is based on CME, which is very clear, and they've talked about that before, which is over 50 years old, and we've talked about the evidence for that. We want to keep an eye on the clinical trials register for any new work that's being done. And at the end of the day, there's an ethical responsibility here that before more and more clinicians are trained in this, exposing more and more families to this, that work is done to show what the outcomes are, not just immediate, but also what are the long-term outcomes? Do they retain that for 6 months? Do they retain it long-term? What do these kids look like? And importantly, adverse effects, something we haven't covered before, because anecdotally, if we're going to go down that path, we have heard many anecdotal reports of fractures from this. I know that locally we've heard of that many times as well. Anything to say about adverse effects, I suppose, data from an orthopedic surgeon's perspective? Like, these should be reported if we're hearing about
I've
this,
heard
right?
of fractures.
Yeah.
Fractures is, it's like always really tricky because you know, fracture in therapy, like you're in a tough spot because you gotta, say, it's okay. What? It's just a tricky thing, but I think someone should probably research, all the adverse events.
Yeah.
Equally as important as the long-term outcome, because going through tough spot to get some improvement may not be worth it as well.
Yeah, that's right. The both of them need to be held in balance, the outcome itself as well as the adverse effects. And that's the benefit, the cost benefit kind of thing that we talk about.
And the adverse effects to the therapists. We're hearing about a lot of injuries in therapists. And even Ramon will say he won't do kids after a certain weight. Jakob is now saying he won't do kids with hip hardware. Like, we have to really know what the effects are of these rapid velocity, high velocity, over the head kind of maneuvers that people are doing. And what we say in the article is we remind you that in most countries, you are a mandatory reporter. So that if you do have an adverse reaction in a therapy, that has to be reported. That's on your license.
And at the end of the day, that's why you do research, is to go, are these anecdotal reports real? Or are they not? And it goes both ways. You can't ask for research, but then not want to hear about the results. But you can't also say we don't care about the results when it comes to adverse effects. Like, you can't have it both ways. And I think doing the research looks after both of them, and we are very clear about what there should be. So whilst there's a growing interest in DMI, and some people say that shouldn't be dismissed, I suppose what we're really calling here for is a fair discussion. This is the first paper to sort of draw attention to it. And I think by the time we get all these personal attacks on it, I'm not sure there's much there to go. Let's just do the work. Let's encourage people to do the research in the area and allow families to make an informed decision. Final comment from each of you before you have to go. Should we go through first, Dave, in case you have to head off? Final comment.
I think Paw Patrol is awesome.
Learning from there.
Again, I think it just has to be stated, the purpose of the paper is not necessarily to trash talk or trash any specific thing. It's to challenge everybody to look for the evidence.
That's right. Yep. Beautifully said. Álvaro, final thoughts?
Say nothing better than that.
I know. He said it well, didn't he? Should have had him last. Now we're all just agreeing with him. Ros, anything else to add to David's comment?
I'd like to say something that Álvaro said in his post, that nobody's denying that therapists and people who are passionate about this may not have the best intentions, but we've learned from history that often people, interventions were truly believed in until the evidence showed otherwise, and we just need to see what the evidence shows us, and that's what we've tried to start the discussion with.
Yeah, and that's a transparent discussion to support families, really, isn't it? This isn't, like we said, this isn't a witch hunt. I think I saw that written out, this feels like a witch hunt. This is just bringing attention to an area of a very popular therapy that we see on social media that has no evidence to support it. So do it, a call to action. Ginny, final comment from you.
Come to New Orleans, come to Ireland, go to the conference in Australia, make friends, do research off the side of your desk. And if you believe in something, it's up to you to show that it works or doesn't work. But there's no excuses. We're not getting paid to do this. We just made friends at conferences. We are very curious. We want to learn and listen to more Research Works podcasts.
Well, thank you very much. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for being on the pod today across the many different time zones. Love working with you and these great opportunities that we get to collaborate. To all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, heard the heart behind why this paper was written, and how we want to move the field forward. And research really allows us to do that when it's done in a way that really listens to families and has great outcome measures and reports what needs to be reported. So thank you so much for listening. We'll put a link for this in our show notes as well if you haven't got it already. And if you've got any questions, always send them in as well. But for now, we'll say thank you to everyone. Thank you to you on the other side. And goodbye, everyone.